What does the term coach killer even mean? Well, I'm sure you've heard of it. Basically, players who have a decent amount of leverage in their organization decide that they don't like their coach anymore, for one reason or another, and thus doing everything in their power to get them fired. Some players have done it several times, for several different teams they played for. We all know there have been plenty of superstars who requested a coaching change, but in this video, let's take a look at the most egregious scenarios which turned into public feuds. These were so bad that the term coach killer is understating it. Without further ado, here are 5 of the greatest coach killers in NBA history. Hey guys, before we continue with this video, I want to give my sponsor, SeatGeek, a huge shout out. With over 28 million downloads and more than 70,000 events listed, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. And while there's not much NBA basketball going on over the summer, besides Summer League, you can get tickets to see many events beyond just basketball. I use SeatGeek all the time. I live in Austin, and there's plenty of events in the city and in nearby cities. So my wife and I browse for tickets when our favorite artists come to town. Every ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10. Green dots mean they're good deals, while red dots are not so good. The best part, every single ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And of course, you know I got you guys covered. Use my promo code ANDYHOOPS10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with my promo code ANDYHOOPS10. Click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. James Harden. Harden's reputation as a coach killer is something that's definitely a bit more subtle than other players on this list. For example, it all started around the 2015-16 season with the Houston Rockets, when something didn't seem right. Despite reaching the conference finals a few months prior, Rockets head coach Kevin McHale got fired, just 11 games into the new season.
11 games into the season, the Houston Rockets fire Kevin McHale with a record of 4-7. Again, a team that went to the Western Conference Finals.
First of all, James Harden has played awful. Dwight Howard, I think there's got to be something physically wrong with Dwight because he's not the same guy.
Some folks believed it was because they started the season very poorly, winning just 4 of their first 11 games. And most of the blame should have been on James Harden, who came into training camp incredibly out of shape. According to McHale himself, he claimed when he called Harden out for being fat and his lack of effort defensively, Harden resented him. Quote, "The next year he came into camp, he was fat and didn't feel like playing. And I got fired 11 games into the season. He had a plan." Normally, you'd give your superstar the benefit of the doubt, because Harden is more important to the franchise than any of his coaches. However, with his reputation of partying over the summer and visibly looking overweight, the blame shifted to Harden. Everything McHale said about him was true. He most certainly was out of shape, and his defense was as worse as it's ever been.
And a charging foul. Oh no, a blocking foul is called on Pat Beverly.
That was the year when all those James Harden memes popped up everywhere, cause his D was missing. The 2015-16 Rockets were by far the worst year during the James Harden era. They barely squeezed into the playoffs as the 8th seed. The compilations of Harden's completely lackadaisical defense was widespread all over the media, all over the internet. Combined with the team winning just 41 games, Harden didn't even make an All-NBA team. In the 8-year span from 2013 to 2020, that was the only season when Harden did not make it, despite putting up these averages. It shows how much the public perception of him plummeted. This wasn't the first time Harden got accused of being a coach killer, unfortunately. Years later, Harden was one of the guys who did not get along well with Steve Nash in Brooklyn, and while Harden left the team before Nash got fired, he apparently played a major role in convincing the organization that Nash wasn't fit to be a coach. He did get thrown into the fire, and it's hard to handle the injuries and massive egos of a super team like this, especially as a rookie coach. Then, on the Sixers, his coach killer highlights ramped up once again. Harden arrived to Philly with lofty expectations, teaming up with one of the new generation's greatest superstars, Joel Embiid. The coach of this team was Doc Rivers. Well, he kinda became a laughingstock over the years, not just for his overrated coaching ability, but his off-court comments trashing his own players. When the Sixers lost in a rough 7-game series against the Celtics, Doc Rivers got fired, and not too long after, he spilled the tea. During an interview, he was asked about his relationship with his stars, in particular James Harden, to which Doc responded, "You know what was funny about our relationship? It was an honest one, I'll tell you that. It's probably why I'm doing TV as a commentator. I would say not making the All-Star team really bothered him." As a Sixer, Harden missed the All-Star team for the first time in 10 years, and that really upset him. It upset him so much that he went to Doc Rivers and demanded more touches, a different, bigger role in the offense, which eventually led to them clashing, and both of them leaving the team over the same summer. It was, quite funny when it happened, because we knew Harden had a role in Doc's departure. The fact that he also demanded a trade after that is pretty damn hilarious. On the bright side, it might have been a good thing. Philly got rid of Doc. As great as Harden was, his image as a coach killer is certainly a stain on his legacy. Stefan Marberry. Starberry became a household name during his time, mostly due to his affordable sneakers, but also his outspoken persona. He'd always say what's on his mind and loves going against the grain. He was also kind of a wild card, and his personality was the antithesis of his coach on the New York Knicks, Larry Brown. The Knicks of the mid to late 2000s was the worst era in the history of this franchise, and much of it was due to the toxic, notorious feud between Marberry and Larry Brown. Now, for those who don't know, Larry is a legendary coach. He led the Pistons to back-to-back finals appearances and the championship. He coached Allen Iverson and the Sixers to the finals back in 2001. Now in New York, he was tasked with an even greater goal: to revitalize a Knicks franchise who've hired 5 different coaches within the span of 5 years. They needed some guidance. Sadly, right from the get-go, there was tension between Brown and the Knicks star. It quickly became public, with both of them taking shots at each other to the press. The whole environment in New York was absolutely awful. The crowd constantly booed both of them for how poorly this era of Knicks basketball had gone. When the Knicks fell to a pitiful 17-45 record, Brown had this to say about Marberry. "So, you're the best guard in the league and the team is 17-45? Yeah, it's the coach's fault. I don't know why you play a team sport and not be concerned about making your teammates better and helping your team win games. That's the only thing that really matters, and if you're the best player, surely you're going to have some effect on the game's outcome."
When you don't hear players talk about team, it's not a lot of fun.
I'm no longer going to allow him to say things about me, and I'm not going to say anything back. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
I'm going to try to focus on guys that care about our team.
I just sat back and just took it. But I'm not taking it.
Brown cited Marberry's selfishness and only caring for his own numbers, which was honestly kinda true. He'd always pout when he'd get benched, and as the losses piled up, he started to care less and less. Eventually, Brown got fired, as Marberry was the one who the franchise prioritized. Despite signing a 5-year contract with the Knicks, Brown only lasted 1 year. In fact, it got so bad that Brown filed a dispute against the organization, and even sued the Knicks owner James Dolan for withholding the rest of his salary from him. Overall, it was a very awkward situation, and the fans got the worst of it. This wasn't the last time Marberry publicly feuded with his coach, however. When Isaiah Thomas took over as head coach, Marberry once again had issues with his playing time, and the two of them routinely argued on the bench right in front of the fans. Fortunately, the Knicks fanbase got some good news for once. Marberry made folks realize how bad Isaiah ran this franchise to the ground, and he basically got him fired as well, thus ending his reign of terror as the president and coach. Unequivocally the most hated person in New York at the time, way more so than Marberry. This was probably the only time in history where a coach killer saved the franchise from utter decimation. Dwight Howard. There isn't much to say about Dwight Howard's time in Orlando that hasn't already been covered. You remember his confrontation with Stan Van Gundy? This awkward interview where Van Gundy discovered that Dwight recently went to the front office and requested him to be fired. Well, the whole Dwightmare saga took a turn for the worse, as Dwight's trade demands and request to fire Van Gundy flooded the headlines. and the man previously seen as a big goofball was now perceived as a coach killer, an immature brat who'd throw a fit if he didn't get what he demanded. Sadly, the image of Dwight only got worse from there.
We'll be fine. I mean, I think this is going to be great for the team. I know a lot of people are hesitant or, about supporting us because of him, but, I feel like he's going to be great for us,
On the Lakers, he once again had a public scrabble and heaps of confrontations with head coach Mike D'Antoni. Though not entirely Dwight's fault, some of his criticisms of D'Antoni's coaching style was valid. For instance, he tried to implement a similar offense as he did back in his days with Phoenix, except he was now working with a 40-year-old Steve Nash, a slower, aging Pau Gasol, and Dwight Howard himself had ailing back problems all year. It really was not a good fit for the team, hence why, just as Dwight departed after a single season, D'Antoni left just 1 year after that. Funny enough, years later, in the summer of 2016, the same summer that D'Antoni got hired by the Houston Rockets to be their new coach, Dwight left the team. Literally 3 weeks after D'Antoni got there, Dwight opted out of his contract and chose to sign with the Atlanta Hawks. He didn't explicitly say D'Antoni was the reason he left, but you can assume in this case. Darren Williams. Jerry Sloan had been the head coach of the Utah Jazz for 23 seasons. At one point, he was the longest tenured head coach for a single team in the history of the NBA, until Greg Popovich eventually surpassed him. Sloan was a beloved figure in Utah, and his impact on his team transcended several eras, from Karl Malone and John Stockton to Carlos Boozer, Darren Williams, Andrei Kirilenko, and he's one of the most successful coaches of all time in terms of win percentage. While he's had his fair share of disagreements with his star players in the past, nothing came close to what transpired between him and Darren Williams. But what exactly transpired? Basically, it was a years-long buildup of tension. Ever since Darren came into the league in 2005, they've butted heads over and over again. In short, Jerry Sloan's game plans and playstyles were very often structured and rigid. When he has a game plan, he expects all his players, regardless of their stature, to execute it to perfection. Darren, however, was a young, brash point guard, arguably a top 3 point guard in the league during his prime. Yet he always preferred to have a longer leash, to not be bound by the restraints of the Jazz offense. Sloan did not like that. He did not like how often Darren would toss aside the game plan and ignore him, with the final nail in the coffin on February 9, 2011, a few weeks before the trade deadline. As Darren Williams reached the upper echelon of NBA stardom, so did his ego. And during a timeout, Sloan got frustrated when he didn't run a play he wanted him to run, asking him on the bench, "Do you want to coach this team?" In the locker room at halftime, instead of his usual breakdowns and assessment of how their team is doing, Sloan broke the huddle with a chant of 1, 2, 3, good luck. The Jazz lost the game. Right afterwards, Sloan went up to the CEO of the Jazz, Greg Miller, and basically told him he was quitting. Quote, "Jerry made it clear that he wasn't happy with the situation, and I and several others tried to rally around him and express our support to him and encourage him to fight through it. It was clear fairly quickly that Jerry was really tired." As a head coach for 23 straight years, I'm sure he was just done with it. Jerry Sloan essentially decided at halftime that he was done, so February 9th, 2011 would be his final day as the coach of the Jazz. 2 weeks later at the trade deadline, the team decided to move on from Darren as well. They would trade him to the New Jersey Nets, thus ending this hectic era in Utah. For Utah, they lost their beloved coach for over 2 decades in the blink of an eye, and the feelings for Darren are still of contempt. Kyrie Irving. There hasn't been a bigger coach killer, and heck, organization killer in recent times than the god himself, Kyrie Irving. What started as a hopeful trio of him, LeBron, and Kevin Love turned into a player who bounced from team to team looking for the right fit, yet struggling to find it. Perhaps, in reality, he was struggling to find himself. Kyrie's most notable coach-killing highlights came in Cleveland, when the Cavs decided to fire David Blatt in the 2015-16 season, despite the Cavs' record being 30-11. At the time, it was the best record ever for a coach who got fired midway through the season, with Kyrie being at the center of it. Reportedly, he was unhappy with David Blatt's inconsistent treatment of the players, for example, giving a longer leash to LeBron, but being more critical of Kyrie himself. Some of it can be justified, as Kyrie being younger and still learning about the game, but it wasn't the way he wanted to be talked to, especially being looked down on like a child. Blatt's firing was very confusing due to his success, but in hindsight, by winning the championship with Tyronn Lue, I'm sure Cavs fans are happy with the results.
It's over! It's over! Cleveland is a city of champions once again!
Fast forward a bit, and here we go to Brooklyn, again. On the same team with James Harden and Kevin Durant, Kyrie stood out as the main antagonist, the most problematic player on the squad. Like his previous encounter, the firing of Steve Nash was also very ambiguous. You could point to many different factors and grievances the players had with him, but it was Kyrie who had zero respect for Nash. Reportedly, there was a game where Kyrie dismissed Nash's play calls in 10 separate occasions in a single game. Kyrie, he just had no interest in being coached by Nash. A scout who observed the game closely stated, "I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Nash would call something and he'd run the opposite. I've never seen anything like that." With all signs pointing to Kyrie being the problem, Sean Marks and the Nets decided to fire Nash anyway, and a few months later trade away Kyrie to the Dallas Mavericks. Perhaps it was best for both parties to move on, and for the Nets to rebuild from scratch the right way, instead of rushing headfirst into yet another super team and hoping something good comes out of it, because it rarely does. And those were 5 of the greatest coach killers in NBA history. I'm sure there are other ones further in the past that I haven't mentioned. Magic Johnson got Paul Westhead fired in Los Angeles in his early days, or LeBron's various attempts at getting Spoelstra replaced, or his role in David Blatt or Frank Vogel's firing too, though the evidence on that is murky at best. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Can you think of any other situations where a player directly got their coach fired? Were there any players even more egregious than the ones in this video? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.